Today we are installing 5 different types of kitchen sink drain strainers. We will be using some of the simplest tools: a channel lock plier, an adjustable wrench, a flathead screwdriver, and a needle nose plier. Of course, you can use professional tools if you have them. All these strainers fit standard 3.5-inch kitchen sink drain openings. Welcome back to another video by the Building Expert team. And let's start by installing this stainless steel strainer with PVC body. The great thing about this strainer is that you can install it without any tools. Start by disassembling the strainer by unthreading the tailpiece and PVC body from the metal strainer. Before you start the installation, make sure the sink surface is clean. Now insert the metal strainer into the drain hole with foam gasket attached from the top, and put the screw in place. Install the black rubber gasket and main body from underneath the sink. Use your finger to put pressure on the screw to stop it from spinning, and snug the metal strainer and main body in place. Make sure the strainer is centered in the drain hole. If it's not, you can adjust it by moving the strainer body. Take a large flathead screwdriver and tighten the screw. Do not over tight, as you can tighten it later if it leaks. If you don't have a flathead screwdriver, use your finger to put pressure on the screw and tighten the PVC body to tighten everything in place. If you can't stop the screw from spinning with your finger, you can use a coin to prevent it from spinning. Some people use the strainer cover. It works, but I wouldn't recommend it because that can damage the edge of the cover. Also, make sure that the main body and strainer line up. If they don't, turn the body until it lines up. Otherwise, it can cause blockages. Now install the tailpiece using the gasket provided. Just hand tighten the tailpiece. You don't need a wrench. This completes the installation of our first strainer. We will install the deep base strainer next. Start by disassembling this very fancy strainer by unthreading the tailpiece and lock nut. As the name describes, these strainers are very deep with a large size basket. Before you start the installation, make sure the sink surface is clean. Now start by inserting the bowl into the drain hole with foam gasket attached from the top. Install the black rubber washer and large lock nut from the bottom and snug the strainer in place. It's helpful to start by aligning the threads in the opposite direction to ensure they catch properly before tightening. Once the strainer is snug, adjust the bowl so that it is in the middle of the drain hole before tightening it with any tools. Use a needle nose plier to prevent the bowl from spinning and tighten the locking nut from the bottom using a channel lock plier. You can also use a strainer wrench to tighten, if you have one. It makes the tightening process very easy. Do not over-tighten the locking nut, as it can be damaged easily. Now install the tailpiece using the gasket provided. Do not over-tighten the tailpiece using a wrench. Just tighten it with your hands and put the basket and cap in place. This completes our deep base strainer installation. Now let's move on to the next strainer. Installation of next 3 strainers require the use of plumber's putty or silicone to create a waterproof seal between the strainer and the sink surface. If you decide to go with putty, roll the putty between your palms to form rope-like shape. Aim for a thickness that matches the depth of the strainer's lip and push it along the lip so that the circumference of the lip is covered with putty. Or apply a continuous bead of silicone around the circumference of the strainer's lip. I prefer putty over silicone because it's easier to clean and it allows for easier future replacement of strainers. Let's install our next strainer, which is this post-style large nut strainer. This is the shallowest strainer of all 5, and it is one of the most commonly used strainer. Start by disassembling the strainer by unthreading the tailpiece and large nut from the strainer. Before we start the installation, make sure the sink surface is clean. Now apply the putty rope or silicone around the circumference of strainer's lip to create a seal. We are using putty for this installation. Place the strainer body in the drain hole and press it down. Some of the putty will squeeze out, but don't clean it yet. From bottom of the sink, install the black washer first, friction ring goes second, and then tighten the large nut to secure everything in place. Or you can stack them on the nut and start threading. Sometimes it's tricky to get the threads started on these nuts. So start spinning it backwards until you hear a click, and then start threading. Snug the nut from the bottom using a strainer wrench or a channel lock plier. If the body spins while tightening, use a faucet wrench or needle nose plier to stop the body from spinning. Once the strainer is snug, remove the excess putty and ensure that the strainer is in the middle of the drain hole. Make any adjustments by holding the strainer from the bottom and fully tight it using a channel lock or a strainer wrench. Now it's time to install the tailpiece. Slide the nut on the tailpiece and put the nylon washer in place and tight it onto the strainer. Hand tight the nut first and then use a channel lock plier to tight it. This completes our strainer installation. Now let's go to the next strainer, which is this double cup strainer. Start by disassembling the strainer by unthreading the tailpiece and nut from the strainer shank. Before we start the installation, make sure the sink surface is clean. Now apply the putty rope or silicone around the circumference of the strainer's top cup's lip to create a seal. We are using putty for this installation. Place the strainer body in the drain hole and press it down. Some of the putty will squeeze out, but don't clean any of it yet. From the bottom of the sink, install black washer, friction ring, pressure cup, and tight the screw on the strainer shank. Use a needle nose plier to prevent the top cup from spinning, and snug the nut using a channel lock plier. Once everything is snug, remove the excess putty and make sure that the strainer is in the middle of the drain hole. Adjust if needed and fully tight the nut. Finally, install the tailpiece. Slide the nut on the tailpiece and place the nylon washer in place and tight it onto the strainer. Hand tight the nut first and then use a channel lock plier to tight it. This completes our double cup strainer installation. Now let's move on to our final strainer, which is this easy lock strainer. Start by disassembling the strainer by backing up the set screws and unthread the retainer nut. Before we start the installation, make sure the sink surface is clean. Add putty or silicone to the lip of the strainer's body. We are using putty for this installation. Place the strainer body in drain opening and press down to secure into position. From the bottom of the sink, place flexible black and metal washer over the strainer body and thread on the retainer. Now tight the set screws with your hands. Adjust the strainer if needed so that it is in the middle of the drain hole. Now tighten the set screws using a flathead screwdriver or an adjustable wrench. Once it's tight, clean off the excess putty. Finally, install the tailpiece. Slide the nut on the tailpiece and put the nylon washer in place and tighten it on the strainer. Hand tighten the nut and use a channel lock plier to tighten it. This completes our strainer installation. Now let's talk a little bit about tailpieces. But before that, if you made to the end of the video, hit subscribe and like the video. When you buy strainers, they don't often come with tailpieces. So make sure you have a tailpiece, a nut and a washer. Some plastic tailpieces have nut molded on them, so you will only need a washer for those. If you plan on using a metal tailpiece, make sure you have a nut and a washer. All these metal and plastic tailpieces are interchangeable. Some tubular drain kits allow direct connection to strainers, and you don't need tailpieces at all. Links to the materials used in the video are provided in the description below. That's all for today's video. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.